Welcome to Beyond the Finish Line. Beyond the Finish Line is a podcast dedicated to digging into the minds of influencers, thought leaders, and market disruptors responsible for shaping frictionless interaction and digital transformation in a modernized enterprise. We discover what motivates them, break down their journey and experiences, and identify where they feel the industry is going. Hear firsthand what works when implementing strategy, technology, and change through the transformation lifecycle. Now, here's your host, Contender Solutions Vice President of Business Strategy, Chris Cosentino.
All right, welcome to Beyond the Finish Line. Today's an exciting day, guys. We have a couple folks here joining us from the great Tanium. Appreciate you gentlemen joining us. Brian Fay, VP of Southeast Sales. And we have Ryan Anderfer, who's VP of Cloud Engineering. Welcome, gentlemen.
Great to be here.
Well, wonderful to be here.
So today, it's a great opportunity for us to discuss a phenomenal technology, a great performing platform for both our customers, obviously your customers. So I really appreciate the insights here. Ryan, in your domain, maybe you gotta give us a little bit of background, Ryan, from maybe how you got to Tanium and your role today.
Yeah, sure. So I actually come to Tanium about 3.5 years ago. It's time is flying very quickly. And I came from Microsoft. And I came with sort of the express intent to build a cloud-hosted version of Tanium. What's enticed me about Tanium when I was leaving Microsoft was how it worked. So the ability to actually understand information from hundreds of thousands of machines in 15 seconds is insane. And the ability to effectively transmit information down to these same machines. When we start to look at that and we start to think about it hosted as a service, I think that it's truly the first thing that actually is differentiated for customers. And they don't have to move data around needlessly. They don't have to think about how to actually store data, to distribute it to all their machines inside of offices. That all just happens naturally. So I saw the vision of building a cloud-hosted version of this and left and came to build it.
Yeah, that's a big leap too, right? Coming from a big animal like Microsoft to an emerging company where you've got a lot of growth opportunity, but that's a big jump, right? It's a leap of faith.
Yeah, so, it's been an amazing ride, and what we've been able to do in the last 3 years since I've come is just make me very proud to work here.
Yeah, and you've definitely come up the ranks too, from technical account management and leading that group, and now really responsible for a lot of product growth and product development. So that's great, and thanks for joining us too. Brian Fay, I'd love to hear your journey too, sir. You've had quite the career in IT and security sales, so I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I've been here at Tanium now for a little over 2.5 years. In my past, early days, like the first software company that I worked for from a sales capacity was a company called Altiris many years ago. And it's amazing because the problems that we're still solving today are the very same challenges that we were solving back in 2004, 2003, that kind of time frame. And since then, I've worked with companies like BMC Software and a number of other opportunities over the years that have really kind of all been focused around kind of this legacy type of technology. And Altiris was certainly one of those. And what really struck me from a Tanium perspective was a fundamental shift in what it was that the company did from a technology standpoint, and yet focused on platforms and being focused on a platform for being built ground up, right? So I know that when, in my former organization, that really resonated with customers, but the problem that we always ran into was scale, right? People loved what we did. We could, knock down, what were very small silos at that particular time, but being able to build out, coordinated workflows was really resonating with customers. The challenge we always had was the bigger the customer got, the more complex it got, even with our own platform, and it became a challenge for them to manage their own management platform. And I found out about Tanium a few years ago, and the more I learned, the more I was interested, because the types of things that we can do, like, Ryan, you just kind of hinted at being able to patch hundreds of thousands of systems from a single server in, minutes, hours versus weeks or not ever happening, completely blew me away. And that was really kind of what got me here to the organization. And since then, it's been a tremendous opportunity, tremendous company. We were just recently ranked to the Cloud 100. I think we're number 9 on that list, so we're happy that we continue to move up there. And we're very excited about this launch of Tanium as a service that we just launched about 45, 60 days ago. It's had tremendous, feedback from our customers. So I'm excited to be here and talk about this with you and Ryan.
Absolutely. No, congrats to both of you and Tanium. I mean, you guys are doing phenomenal things over there. So I remember our first time sitting down, Brian, over dinner, and I talked about what I felt our company does, right, where we deliver velocity and transformation and scalability, consistently for our customers. We're very focused on that transformation path, very, in an agile manner. And, that's really where we felt, Contender felt that Tanium fits that path with our customers. So we're really excited about Tanium as a service, obviously. We're super excited about, the continued partnership and more from the customer perspective. They're successful. The easeability of success has been there. So, it's not just preaching it; the customers are experiencing it. So, it's great qualities to see. What I want to do is I'd love to understand a little bit more. I think our listeners might have heard of Tanium before. They might be kind of coming into hearing about it. Especially now, you're starting to see a lot more down into the mid-market expansion. Tanium's moving that direction a bit. So they might be kind of not really used to the name yet. Ryan, maybe Brian, I'd love to hear from both of you. What's that story like, right? How have you really emerged? Has Tanium really emerged from a smaller shop that's extensively focused on some light levels of operations, whether it's security or IT ops, to now really being this robust platform offering a lot of different capabilities to customers?
Sure, I'll take that, Ryan, if you don't mind. I'll pause for a second and kind of talk about the challenge that Orion and David Hindawi, our founders and chairman and CEO of our organization, they built a previous organization. You may have heard of it, called BigFix. It's one of the challenges that they identified. And again, I mentioned this whole challenge of scale and speed to be able to understand what you have out in your environment. And they spent 5 years in building this platform. And I don't lay that out lightly, because when you see it and you understand how it works, it's very, very simple and elegant. But the amount of time and effort and sweat, blood, and tears that went into developing that were really, really critical. And that's kind of where it starts. But what that allows us to be able to do, right? Because these were challenges that I had faced at my previous organization, as I already mentioned, but David and Orion had faced with their large customers from their previous organization, is that it really, if you think about the challenges that organizations are having, you've got technology that today is still managing or securing based on thoughts, the types of environments that were from 20 years ago, right? They weren't built to be able to handle cloud workloads or containers or the variety of different endpoints, certainly being out of, from a work from home standpoint, right? And then you add to that, constant, evolving threats and disruptions that are happening on a regular basis. And then you have compliance, which is really, really raised the bar, right? It used to be just kind of a check in the box, and now it's vital or critical for an organization to make sure that you're managing those different areas, right? And so what happens, it's what happened for a long period of time, is you keep buying more and more tools, right? So you need, whether it's on the operations side, and you've got, I mean, we talk to customers and they'll have 3 or 4 or 5 different patching technologies on the operations side. And if you go to the security side, they'll have, a dozen. And what we find is there's huge amounts of tool proliferation. And on average, I think we see, I think this is from a recent Forrester study, that it was like 20 plus endpoint agents down at the PC or the Mac level, right? And in fact, I had a little story. I was with a large financial customer of ours, and out of the box, their gold image was already at 55% performance hit because of the agents they had placed on that. Because all these things are really important: being able to patch, being able to secure, being able to detect what's going on inside the organization. But that just leads to complexity. And to kind of steal a quote from the late Howard Schmidt, the former cybersecurity czar for Presidents Bush and Obama, complexity is the enemy of security, right? It just leads to more and more challenges. And we like to call these 3 different gaps, right? You've got visibility gaps, you've got resilience gaps, and you've got accountability gaps, right? And from a visibility standpoint, teams just struggle. They struggle because they can't get the basic visibility. Where years ago, people were walking around with clipboards and Excel spreadsheets. Today, they may not be walking around with clipboards as often. I'm not saying that they're not, but the technology that they have, because of all these various disparate endpoints that they have within their environment, they typically don't know truly what they have. I mean, they can't answer a fundamental question of how many endpoints do you have? I mean, we'll hear a scale of 20 to 30,000 or 40,000, right? And so that really makes it a challenge for an organization. Then if you think about from a resilience gap standpoint, you've got all these disparate technologies. They're slow, unreliable, and what happens is that IT leaders or even business leaders are caught off guard when they're not able to complete their patch cycles, right? I recently spoke with a customer who had a really good patch management process to really improve their IT hygiene, and they were getting to about 85%. And that senior level executive said, 85% is no longer good enough, right? That's what we've been kind of working towards. We've got to improve. And if you think about the folks that are trying to get in the back door, they don't care. They want the 15%. And in this particular instance, this customer was identifying, non-compliant machines, and the 15% was taking, 3-4 weeks in order to be able to complete that. And if you look at the final, kind of piece from a gap standpoint, it's all around accountability, right? And that's being able to take the data, be able to quickly present that to the board so that you can make really good decisions, strategic business decisions based on true authoritative data, right? And if you can solve that, if you can solve visibility, if you can solve resilience, and you can solve accountability gaps, you really have something that can be really, really strong for an organization. And that's where kind of our view is, that all around the platform. As I mentioned before, this has always resonated about platforms, and we believe that that for the endpoint to really, really be resilient, you've got to align your teams and your processes around that platform so that you have accurate, consistent endpoint data, and then you're able to, once you have that visibility, then you can control, right? So identifying risks, identifying vulnerabilities, and identifying all assets, and being able to fix those with speed at scale. And that's where we come into our our whole viewpoint, which is around unified endpoint security and unified endpoint management, and being able to pull those two organizations. You've got IT operations and you've got IT security, and being able to pull them together in a coordinated fashion so you have streamlined workflows. And that's where, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but that's where ServiceNow and Service Graph really comes into play, because that automates what we can provide from a control standpoint down at the endpoint.
Yeah, it's a great pivot too, Brian. So one of the points that you made, right, is data-driven decisions, right, and being able to leverage true information, right. And at the end of the day, I don't know if you listened to it, but we had a security leader from Nielsen on a couple of weeks ago, And one of the conversations that we were having was really about how some of the platform technologies that they're leveraging are now allowing him and his business unit to act as a true proactive consultant to the business. And I think that that's something that's missed a lot of times where, whenever I think of security ops or even just the model of DevOps in general, right? People always say, "Oh, that's like a mythical creature to get to that area of maturity or adoption." And a lot of times, and this is what we do, right? When we consult on organizations that are really trying to emerge into the DevOps scene and do these things with a security blanket around it, it's the silos that really harm us. It's the workflow slowdowns, right? Because when you think about it, everything has to do with the flow of work. So what I saw them solving, over at Nielsen and what based off of what Chris was talking about is truly being able to get everybody on a system, on singular platform in a unified manner to be able to quickly start making decisions and stop focusing on the minor things that were very tactical and redundant. Start automating a lot of that, or push that off to a third party that can support you, and leverage that to go into the businesses or the business owners and help them really build out their models or their products and things like that. So we're seeing it in real life, as we're consulting and on your behalf as Tanium and Contender's behalf with ServiceNow. And when you add the component to what you just referenced around Service Graph and ServiceNow and being able to bring TrueMap's data in and be able to truly look at things at a service level, at a product level, and put the wrapper of security and risk management around that, it allows teams to work much more unified. It allows folks to really accept that security and ops and dev can truly all work together because we're removing the frictions. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of between Tanium and ServiceNow and the interoperability.
Yeah, that's right.
So Ryan, I want to circle back to you on the concept, right? So when you think of unified management, you think of Tanium from an ops and security standpoint. What's that look like in real life? I mean, you've had a lot of experiences with customers. What does that actually look like when you go in and you start? I'm sure it always starts with a use case and starts to expand and things like that. So I'd love to hear your experiences.
Yeah. So I think the most true experience is literally just that, an experience. So I think we draw this arbitrary line because our tools draw an arbitrary line between like what good ops is and what good security is. To be honest, like they're so intertwined, it's impossible to sort of split them apart. So I used to work with a customer, and I got the famous call at 7 o'clock at night. Something was going on. Major financial, a few 100,000 machines. Jumped on a call with two of their guys on their CSERT team. At that point, they were a unified endpoint security customer, just a unified endpoint security customer. And they had an ongoing breach. So they were trying to figure out and be situationally aware, like what is this thing? Where is it? What's my exposure? We very quickly hopped on, figured out, scoped the initial exposure, and got some quarantine content out there to ensure that we remediated, make sure it couldn't go any further. Got a few more people on and figured out what was actually going on. So this was about maybe 6 months after. If you remember, the WannaCry outbreak was about 6 months after, and it turned out that somebody had a machine that had been like a classic machine in a closet, and they had plugged it in. This machine was plugged into a server network that had a number of machines that, for some reason, hadn't been patched. The beautiful part about Tanium is that we're a platform. Like I can do endpoint security stuff. I can help you triage. I can help you do incident response. I can help you protect against it. I can also just help you fix the fundamental problem that's wrong. This customer didn't own patch from Tanium at that point. That's another thing I love about Tanium as a company. I got on the phone with Orion and told him the situation. Cut them a license a few minutes later, put it in their environments, and patched their machines. Just patched their machines. Fixed it. There's nothing quite like that. Like our platform can literally do anything. And in the moment, when you're in the middle of an incident, a lot of times the actual remediation, ops thing, unified endpoint management thing. So I really actually like, while we do talk about actual solutions in both of these camps, you have endpoint management, you have endpoint security, so being able to patch, being able to deploy software, being able to understand how agents are affecting your users for performance and what their actual experience is, and being able to understand telemetry on the security side, being able to do incident response. At the end of the day, your end users and your people don't care about that delineation. They've got a device or they've got a server that they're responsible for. They need to work properly. We've solved the fundamental computing problem of how to get a lot of machines to talk to each other and do things. And on top of that, we've just built the way to manage your endpoints.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking through is the basics, right? I think a lot of folks lose sight of the simple blocking and tackling, when they try to get to that, nirvana state, right? You can get to the nirvana state, but you got to get the blocking and tackling, right. And the reduction of the remediation time, what Brian was referencing around the identification process and the true control and visibility, that's basic blocking and tackling that has to get right. Having silos and breaking the silos down are challenges that customers are having. I think you're solving those things.
Yeah, you could if you're not careful, you really, the challenge of integrating these tools, you want to be an SI and have to integrate all those technologies yourself, right? Because what happens is it's poorly integrated. Oftentimes it involves a spreadsheet and some sort of gap in the process, right? Which isn't good, right? And then you have decisions that you need to make on data that's out of date, right? And that's a challenge, especially when you're trying to protect your organization, right? Because too often people think about security as almost kind of being a gatekeeper or something that slows you down, right? And I always look at it like security is like brakes on a car. You don't put brakes on a car so you can go slower, right? It's so that you can make your business or your car faster, or in this case, your business more agile. And we have there's a good example of automation where they took this integrated capability, they're a customer of ours, right? And they went, before they had about 60% visibility on their coverage within their organization from a first patch standpoint. And they were able to go from 60% to 99% on their patch compliance. And that was, like being able to install new security controls on 20,000 machines in like just a handful of days, right? It was something that they couldn't do at all before. And then they were able to do that through this integrated approach, which pulled together both sides of the organization.
Absolutely. It's interesting too, is like, I'm working with a digital strategist. I've been working for a number of years, and we sat down and had a conversation, and and the conversation, he's got a lot of vendors in there, right? Because everybody's got the next cutting edge technology, and you got a lot of these like monitoring systems, that are out there, and he's like, what, Chris, at the end of the day, what I'm really looking for is I need a complete picture, right? He's a very product minded person. He's like, I need a complete picture, and people think that the complete picture to me is what's happening in a microservice environment, what's happening in the infrastructure environment. And he's like, I'm thinking about this much more holistically. I want to know from a security standpoint, I need to understand that information. From a customer satisfaction standpoint, if someone's utilizing our product and they're tweeting out the horrible experience they had in leveraging my product, I want to know that. That's an event. That's an incident for us to be able to control. So when I look at interoperability, and when we discuss, the nature of product management and truly getting to the digital age of what folks are trying to accomplish at a product level, the engineering teams really need to have those controls in place. So getting all of this onto a single platform, using Tanium really as that data source when we work with our customers with ServiceNow, so we're able to enrich the CMDB at a risk level and be able to see that holistically rolled into a product, right?
Sure.
ServiceNow is really good at being able to see things in a lens of, service, right, and products. We can put things into those packages or in the CMDB and start showing, all right, here's my systems tracking my risk. Here's the data that is against that. I can correlate those things, and I can automatically start remediating those efforts. So to me, when we talk to these digital strategists, they get that agility for them to be able to not only make decisions, but things that are happening in the environment consistently, automate those. And that's some of the things that we're seeing, and as we're consulting on your behalf. So I want to real quick. So, February comes around this year. I think we all had plans. Our customers had plans. We all have had plans on our successes that we're going to have and drive forward with them. And some even the customers that are leveraging really strong technologies and risk and vulnerability management probably felt like they had a good managed state. And then COVID hits, right? So you've got 22% of the workforce working remotely on average prior to COVID. I think the numbers jumped up to over 53% of the workforce. So that means assets are literally piling up and filing their way out of the door. So I think a lot of folks have experienced, and what I've been talking to some of the leaders that we work with is we went to from this managed state where we felt okay, a little bit of a control, to chaos, to a chaotic state. And I'm seeing a difference in the folks that had a system in place like Tanium, an integrated model with ServiceNow, having true visibility, not just the theory of visibility, true visibility. They were the ones that were able to make specific progress and control in that arena. So you talk us through what Tanium has been doing with customers that are dealing with COVID. I mean, obviously it's a challenge in a lot of different ways, but specifically in that asset world and visibility world, I can't imagine that you're not fielding calls of challenges there.
Yeah. So one of my favorite frames for this is the frame that Orion made like a month or two ago. COVID is really everybody's work from home plans that they had and planned to do over the next 5 years. Go ahead and do those in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yes. And I've heard that so many times.
It's kind of really daunting. And Brian, maybe you can speak to this, but like what we've seen from Tanium's perspective is just a real influx of people asking, how do I help me manage all these things that walk around and just left my office. One of the beautiful parts about Tanium is from the get-go, we've been designed for this. Earlier on, we talked about like you guys are starting to come down into the mid-market and become more accessible to more and more customers. It's precisely because of this sort of thing. Like we're built for this world. So think about who Tanium's customers have always been. The largest customers in the world, most complicated networks, the most distributed environments. We've got consulting customers that have 500,000 machines, 500,000 consultants that just walk around at customer sites. Work from home or just not next to each other has been how we've designed products from the get-go. So if I talk about like how has Tanium had to shift in order to be effective in a work from home perspective, we've just had to talk to more customers about like you probably should use this for doing patch. You probably should use this for doing software distribution and managing your endpoints, or getting telemetry to ensure that you're still secure on all these things just went home. So we've been doing this forever. If you think about like every other sort of technology that's in unified endpoint management, we'll take that market here for a second. Like that market's pretty much is designed at like how do I take some bits and push them out to endpoints, right? How do I do software distribution? How do I do patch distribution? All of these other sort of things. And traditionally, like every one of those solutions has been predicated on the idea that I'll take and inside of your office or something, I'll put like these servers that all of your machines will go talk to.
Absolutely.
The model is just fundamentally broken with work from home. Like nobody's in offices. So like in those 2 weeks, what people attempted to do was let's just attempt to like do this over a VPN. And my oh my, that does not work. Like think about the capital investments in the net. It just doesn't work. Like patching and distributing software and making sure your employees can still work over a VPN. You're talking VPN.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it took us, Ryan, when I think back about it, I think it took us into maybe the middle of March, right? Where not only were we having a conversation about Tanium, right, and obviously what Tanium would be able to do, but what we were starting to identify is customers were also looking at it from, unfortunately, there's been a reduction of workforce in operations, right? Where in some of the customers that we supported, 80% of their contractors were wiped off the map, and that's a lot of ops. I mean, and there's a lot of development that went on pause, things like that. So a lot of our conversation shifted to, all right, not only do we need to improve our capabilities to manage these assets and the visibility, but we also need to be able to automate, right? We need to be able to remove silos. We need to be able to cut spend with multiple vendors that have redundancies, and let's look at a best in breed product. So I think, Brian, a lot of the ways that we've been engaging with, from our sales unit, pre-sales unit, advisories team, and your group is offering what is the ops assessments, right? Which is really diving into where the customer's gaps are, right? It gives them a bird's eye view with a light usage of the platform. It gives them a bird's eye view of how are they operating. And I think I've seen 2 or 3 of them where it was clearly showing some major gaps, right? Where it felt like, oh, patch is in a controlled state, we're doing well, and then all of a sudden we turn it on, it lights up the board.
That's right.
And it's and in some cases they're like, oh, turn that off, but in other cases it's and they get it. At the end of the day, it's not about coming in and looking at stuff and putting the pressure on. It's more, again, look at the visibility that you need to truly manage your environment and your assets. So I think one of the values that we've seen through this is, even in that, they might not be ready to make the decision immediately on bringing Tanium in, but the value that we've been seeing is, let us come in and run this assessment, and it's going to show you a lot of things that you're going to be able to do, and some of your gaps, and then let us talk about how we could do that with Tanium, how we can do that with an interoperable play with ServiceNow, and what this looks like. And ultimately, the customers that we've done it with on a consistent basis, they're bringing supply chain and procurement and saying, look how much money we can save. Look how much operational cost that we're eliminating. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experience on that too, Brian or Ryan.
Yeah, no, again, it feels like it's back to the future here, right? Again, when we do these, sometimes you'll hear us refer to this as an IT hygiene assessment or an IT gap assessment. Essentially it's the same thing, right? And it's just us, again, focusing on primarily visibility. We run some content within our technology. And just recently we ran one. It was a customer has about 30,000 endpoints, and we ran a IT hygiene assessment for them on about 4,000 or 5,000 endpoints, as I recall. We identified, like, they had probably like 30,000 vulnerabilities that we identified. But the scariest part was many of them were from like 2017 and 2018. Wow. They weren't aware that they were there. We identified old versions of Java or old versions of other applications that were severely vulnerable within their organization, and we were able to help them quickly patch those particular endpoints. But then it's things like you mentioned, from a cost saving standpoint, we can quickly identify applications that haven't been run in the last 90 days, right? And that is real dollar savings for an organization. We had a healthcare organization. I think they have about 50 or 60,000 endpoints. We came in. The challenge was patching, right? So they were in the low 80s from a patch compliance standpoint. We were able to drive them up into the high 9s, right, on a regular, fast, scalable speed standpoint, right? But the big thing that we identified was they had a tremendous amount of software that was really dragging down their enterprise. And we were able to actually provide them a payback from the entire investment on Tanium within about 6 or 7 months, just based on that one concept of software license reclamation in their particular instance.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's been an interesting point for us, right? Our ITAM program at Contender, we're hyper-focused on the maturity levels of an organization that are trying to build an ITAM program. And, we were one of the first implementation partners for SAM. We actually were part of their design team at ServiceNow. And what we love, and the conversations we're actually having with some of your product teams, is this interoperability at the SAM level, right? To be able to do that in a repeated manner, and not just the remediation efforts, but the identification, the management process, the controls that go in place, all those benefits that come in the SAM product, and also then leveraging the interoperability to a system that can be the identifier. We need to be able to pull that information forward. So as we progress customers to maturity, usually maturity level 3, in leveraging software asset, excuse me, that becomes a pivoting point. So absolutely, and I just want to make sure we kind of covered that, because we're seeing some great successes from your team and our advisories team around customers getting us in and truly seeing what Tanium can do, and that's a great way for customers to do this if they're serious about the scale of what they're trying to do from a security operations perspective. It's a great way to see where there are gaps and how I can really justify bringing a product like Tanium in the door. Great. So one point I forgot to cover here. So I didn't forget it, but I wanted to kind of hit upon something. So we were super excited about this, Brian. When you and I first sat down again, I hate to keep going back to the point, but one of the things is I think we were both testing each other out. Where's this partnership going to go, and is it worth our investment in time, right? And one of the things that we were concerned about, right, is when we work with some of our other partners and technology partners, they have a very lightweight deployment model, right? And we were a little nervous about the deployment model because we work with a lot of what I'd say mid-market accounts, and that's a big point of contention for them. So I was really excited about with the release of TaaS and Tanium as a service, and it was definitely a conversation point for us about how we're going to be able to quickly get customers successful. So I'd love to give you guys an opportunity to talk a little bit about TaaS and what that looks like.
Yeah, completely. What did I leave Microsoft to come build? Again, we'll come back to your earlier statement. How do we actually approach? I'll call them normal customers, right? So the customer's got 5,000, 20,000 seats. So you bring up that software as a service, most of the things that you work with are software as a service. I think about Tanium, historically, we weren't. What we were was a platform that was designed to handle the largest networks in the world, where we kind of optimized for that customer. If you think about it, though, what you're doing when you're building that is building an incredibly flexible, incredibly scalable platform, which makes it pretty easy to actually create a software as a service version of it. But that's actually a key thing. So we again are a platform that plays in unified endpoint security and unified endpoint management. And while I'll agree with you that on the security side, there's a lot of consolidation in the as a service world. On the endpoint management side, man, it's hard. The competitors, the places that Brian used to work and other competitors, they're not cloud. There is no software as a service. There's maybe a treat your endpoint like a phone type software as a service. That's not endpoint management. That's right. This thing's not a phone. So those stories always include let's do some sort of co-management where you still have this massive amount of on-prem infrastructure that you have people who know how to run and manage. It's not a market that anybody other than us has actually been able to penetrate as a service because it's a really hard thing to do effectively as a service provider. We've learned how to do it effectively as a service provider in the largest network in the world. We already scale that high. Scaling down to mid-market makes a lot of sense now. COVID has made this market just ask for Tanium in a very consumable fashion. So it's a lot of fun right now. We get to go in and talk to people who are bought into software as a service as a delivery model. I want lower total cost of ownership. I just want to use this thing to do patching, to do software distribution, to do endpoint performance management, to do all the things that Tanium does. I don't have to think about how it runs or how it does that. I just want to be able to say, go push Office to this machine. Go run this vulnerability report on all these guys at home. And we provide that now with no infrastructure. You come, you sign up, and it's off to the races. This has been, we've been live for, Brian's point, 60 days. The customer demand, the new customer demand has just been far more than we expected, which has been really nice. And we've gone from environments that never had heard of Tanium to fully deployed across 15,000 endpoints in 48 hours, which is crazy. That is software as a service.
If I could, Ryan, so what we're doing with Tanium, I want to be, this is really, really important. What we're doing with Tanium as a service is something that I've seen other companies try to do multiple times, right? I've worked there, right? I was at a company called Numara, came out with Numara Cloud, and the company was later acquired by BMC. But what the growth that we saw, I mean, customers, the ability to be able to deploy software, to patch systems, to be able to protect those systems, to be able to identify services and map services inside an organization, all from the cloud. It's kind of like the panacea that people have been trying to get to for so long because, everybody's going cloud first. I say that, but everybody's trying to do some form of moving things to the cloud, right? And the fact that we started, down this path, probably a year and a half ago when we first kind of internally talked about what we were doing. Timing's been really, really good for us. And as Ryan said, what we determined is that, wow, we're actually extremely good at being able to do this, not because of something we designed. It's because just the fundamental architecture that we already had was really built for this. So now I have an example, right? So a customer, a non-customer, a prospective customer of ours, about a month ago had a challenge within their organization, and they needed to remediate very, very quickly within their organization. They called us up in the morning. By the afternoon, we had stood up our Tanium as a service. It literally took about 20 minutes, right, to stand up Tanium as a service for this particular customer. By about 10 o'clock that night, we had already rolled out, I think, 4,000 or 5,000 endpoints, right? Agents to those endpoints. And by late that week, we had already remediated and kind of inoculated some of the challenges that they were facing inside their organization. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we typically find about 20% more endpoints. We identified a good 1,000 or 2,000 more endpoints within their organization that they didn't have managed. They were what we refer to as rogue endpoints. And so this customer, that's one story. And then the other piece as it relates to Tanium as a service is, especially in the customers that are in the what we refer to as the enterprise space. They're organizations that are in the neighborhood of 5 to 40,000 endpoints. What we're finding more and more is that those customers are really looking to rationalize all this proliferation of all these technologies that they have. They're looking to consolidate and look to save money through common interface. The whole scenario of everybody's working off the same platform and console, to the tune where now customers, because it's available in the cloud and because it's available as a platform, instead of maybe starting with one use case, they're deciding to actually go and buy a large swath of our platform all at once because they see what it's going to drive from them from a cost realization standpoint, from a control standpoint, from a software license management standpoint. And, they're eager to get the benefits that, we've been seeing with other customers over a lengthy period of time. These are customers that want to do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. It's interesting too, what I got excited about when I started thinking about Tanium as a service is, our Contenders Advisory Program, right? People always like, well, what is that? What is your managed model? What type of service is that really included? Because folks typically are looking for the answer of, well, we're going to come and just simply manage your environment. We're going to be able to, make the technology work, right? And that's a great perspective. I think we absolutely do that. There's portions of that, but the value at the end of the day is, to me, is the adoption. The adoption of these technologies, and what Tanium as a service, what I think is really giving the customer is, I don't necessarily have to worry about what typical legacy IT thinks about, which is, I need an administrative group that's hunkered in and focused on how the technology works, making the technology work. And it's more about, how am I consuming this information and this data to go off and make decisions, right? To go off and be a consultant to the business. And that's what our advisory service and program really is doing, is with ServiceNow, with Tanium, is helping organizations break down the information that's being presented to them, make meaningful use out of it, and allow them to go off and be proactively focused on improving service delivery, improving remediation functions, optimizing processes to scale, right? And the goal is to really be able to truly adopt it, consume it, and look for net new opportunities to leverage the technology, which I think obviously that makes us pretty attractive to the vendors, right? From a software perspective, because you've got a customer that's holistically leveraging more and more of your software. But at the end of the day, it's at a very high level of value to the customer. So it's great if a customer is buying technology. It's even better if they're actually using it and leveraging it with a high immense value. And that's where we really are coming into play. And that's where we see Tanium as a service, giving that flexibility.
Chris, and the thing is, what you're driving with those customers that you're referring to, when you start to orchestrate and automate those types of processes, then you're really helping to drive what those critical business issues are from a high end standpoint, right? So you mentioned, digital transformation. You mentioned driving customer experience and improving that for them. Ultimately, what you do when you automate that and you provide that kind of you close down that resilience gap is you drive agility within a business, right? So now you can make those decisions fast. You can pivot on a dime because you have the capabilities and the automation to be able to do that, and you can do that at much lower cost from an organization so that you can take those dollars that normally are the run the business or business as usual piece, and you can start to apply those to the fun things, right? The digital transformation initiatives that you referred to earlier around DevOps and being able to really drive an agile organization that is focused on the top line versus how do I control the bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the value state, right, is where the customers need to be sitting, right? If I can leverage my team to be focused on the value that I'm delivering from the products that we need to build and how do we digitize our products and our services, that's really where they need to live. And the understanding of their business and the culture and that mentality of the folks that are right now doing mundane work is really where we need to be able to uplift them. And it's a challenge, right? There's a lot of organizational change that is involved in that, maturing states and things of that nature. But it's working through leveraging the data to make those decisions that actually elevates them, that actually elevates the organization. So I couldn't agree more. So Ryan, I want to circle back to you on and then we'll kind of close out here as we get to the end. But I think we have a really good understanding off of today's conversation on what's the value that we're delivering today. Tanium as a service has been promoted in the last 60 days. Customers are really adopting it. I'm seeing it. You guys are seeing it's great. It's giving a lot of agility. What's next? I mean, where do you see the future of Tanium, and where do you see the additional value that your customers are going to gain from you guys?
Yeah. So one of the things that has always been exciting about Tanium, the what's next question is always sort of wrapped around like, what are the needs of our actual customers? So when we look at like what do we build next, it's talking to customers about what's challenging in your world. A lot of what's challenging in people's world at this moment is, I got a whole bunch of machines. I'm not sure they're ever coming back. I'm not sure they're ever coming back to networks. So if you think about things like Zero Trust, we made an announcement a while ago with Okta on how Okta can integrate with us to do more intelligence around the configuration state of an endpoint for understanding should it be allowed to connect. I think what we're going to see in the next 12 months is a lot of what are our customers actually struggling with because of COVID and because of this distributed nature, and see us investing a lot in there. And then even more short term, Tanium was designed for like usually incredibly complicated networks. A lot of what we're doing right now is figuring out how do we make this thing really delightful to use for regular operators. Like this is going to become part of everybody's like normal life interacting with our console. How do we make it a delightful experience? How do we make sure that it's both? So it's simple, but simple in an elegant fashion. If I want to come in and distribute software, I want to come in and do a compliance report. it's intuitive for me to understand. I can just do this. I can see like the impact that it's making. Right. So to Brian's earlier points, we have this IT hygiene content that actually shows what is like how am I doing? Like all of these things, front and center, very easy for you to understand, very easy to see like what is the configuration or what are the there's a lot of usability and a lot of focus on ensuring that what we do really, really well, and works incredibly well for customers in a work from home scenario.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you can't go wrong with customer value and customer experience, right? And I think that the one thing that I've seen, I think I've been attached to Tanium in the ecosystem now. I think we're going on roughly 2 years. We danced a little bit for a year, and I think we really bought in over this last year. And what's prevalent to me, and it's nice, and it actually matches, for us is, we take a lot of pride at Contender in working with our customers and understanding their experiences, and focused on, diminishing the frictions, right? How much can we kind of mitigate that friction in an experience, whether it's an experience in working with us, whether it's an experience in they're getting with their vendors and technologies, or how are they interacting with the business? And then we focus on that a lot. And what I've seen is Tanium really listening, right, and going out and having conversations with customers, understand what they've experienced, and not just the paying customers, the folks that are doing these POCs or hygiene checks, and really being able to dig into that to understand those environments and how we can solve problems that they're facing. So it's a great partnership that quality and partnership, I should say. So well, gentlemen, I will tell you this: I really appreciate the time today. I will say the partnership between our organizations has been extremely it's been a very successful one. Two, it's been really helpful for our customers to really look at Tanium and the successes that you're driving with customers. So we're looking forward to continuing that. I'm really hoping that the listeners have learned a lot about what Tanium is offering and where they're going, and obviously you've offered a lot of great customer experiences and understanding of what's going on out there. So I know I'll speak on behalf of the listeners out there, but we really appreciate you guys joining us today and sharing your insights.
Yeah,
Great.
Thank
you very much. Your Contender is a great partner of ours, and this was a great experience to go through. This is my first podcast, but I've enjoyed it and look forward to being able to help each other out in the marketplace. This is a great partnership.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to the growth, guys. Thanks for the time, and look forward to future conversations. Ryan, it's a pleasure meeting you for the first time and getting to know you through this process. So thanks for the time, bud.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Beyond the Finish Line. We hope you enjoyed this interview as much as we did. We welcome you to visit us at contendersolutions.com/Beyond the Finish Line, where you can find the link to our guest's bio, downloads of our previous sessions, and additional social media posts related to client success. Thanks for the support, and we will see you next time on Beyond the Finish Line.